by skewing the market to produce housing supply for high-income earners and destroying the low-income stock market supply of housing because of that huge wealth gap in the kind of big workforce. I'll try to fly through some of these now because I'm probably going over my time, but so they will also make an area more attractive to investors by increasing policing in areas that are planned for redevelopment. So this is actually the RISE team, a police squad that was created by the Riverside Togetherness Project, which was a stakeholder gathering of developers and the city and the police to increase policing in the Riverside area. And one of the cops on that squad actually ended up killing 2 residents, Mike Ramos and Maurice De Silva, in the following years. And it was, made for that purpose. They will also make an area more attractive to investors and wealthy residents by recriminalizing homelessness and sweeping camps of our unhoused neighbors, clearing the way for redevelopment. It's just very important to understand that the prelude to a lot of the big zoning changes that we saw last year was the recriminalization of homelessness and focusing a lot of police, a lot of effort into the sweeps to clear folks out and make areas attractive for wealthy people and investment. Okay, and for this one, I'd like to ask Jake to come up, or you can speak from where you are if you prefer. Yeah, come on up. So this one is investors, developers, and owners will deregulate zoning restrictions to increase entitlements, which is how much the developer has the right to build on the lowest rent properties so that they can build as many market rate units as possible, with as little affordability required as possible.
Okay, I'm going to make it really quick, but in 2022, I worked with Sol helping the tenants at the old homestead organize Renters Association so that they could try to get compensation from a developer. The main points that we found while doing this were that City Council would often come out, pay lip service, and claim that there was no way we'd get over a certain amount of tenants. I think it ended up that the tenants received about 6 times more than City Council said was the highest amount they could possibly receive for their displacement. Right? They said that they could only receive $500. What we needed was an amount of money that was acceptable for people to continue to live in Austin, not be displaced out of the city, out of the state, out of the country in some cases, or to be put in a position where their existence was criminalized by homelessness. So the $3,000 that was received by tenants was enough for most of them to stay in the city, which was a great win. And it's happened again since then. The methods that we used to keep that momentum going and to keep pressure on council and developers was by maintaining visibility. So we had stories coming out in the press, we had people interviewing tenants. The strongest tool we had was narratives from the tenants who were being displaced, because that is not only the heart of it, but it's also the people who are the most directly affected. Lived experience is going to win out every time. If you can keep that pressure on, keep your stories told, keep them visible, then you can win and you can prevent the harm the developers cause without care for the lives of others. There is a tenant relocation fund that at the time we were told was voted on, approved, and then there was no funding mechanism put in place to supply it. We don't know if the city is currently funding the tenant relocation fund, if the city is going to provide for people who are being displaced. So self-advocacy and organization is still the best tool that tenants have. Hopefully that gets better, but it's only going to happen if we continue to press and continue to make this work. Is there anything else?
Awesome. And I also want to point out that Hossein, what I know, is still very involved in tenant organizing to this day. So a lot of the folks who, do fight this fight stay in it for the long run with others. Okay. So yes, I did try to kind of go over this, but deregulating zoning and restrictions to increase the entitlements, which is how much the developer has the right to build on that property. They do it on the lowest rent properties that they can find so that they can build as many market rate units as possible with as little affordability required as possible. With the situation that Jake was talking about, we were able to win compensation, but not replacement of the affordable units. The market does not produce truly affordable units. That's really important for folks to understand when we talk about supply. If we're just increasing supply and it's not required to be affordable, it's not going to be affordable. So very quickly going to go through some of these. Deregulate zoning restrictions to increase entitlements in the lowest rent properties, to build market rate and luxury housing in a low income neighborhood. And what this triggers is developers see, oh, city council let them upzone on this property and it massively increased the value of their profits. Let me do it on the one next door. Let me do it on the one down the block. And so that's why you see gentrification often kind of moves in stages down the street. That's a vulnerability map for vulnerability to displacement created by the Uprooted report, and it's still updated by UT. We are going to talk later about how to use that as an important tool. So next, to increase profit, real estate development investors will deregulate zoning restrictions to increase entitlements on the properties. And this time, it's not even necessarily so that they can build more. They want to dramatically increase the value of the property, or the land, which is speculation like we talked about, in order to just resell it at a high profit. Or increase the value of their real estate to show investors that their portfolio's value is increasing, or even have a higher value asset that they can use to get bigger loans from banks to either buy more properties or pay back their investors. So we don't even have to, Chris Page knows a lot about this, maybe people can ask more about this later, but what's happening on East 12th and East 11th Street, let's just keep going. They will also do this to allow your properties to remain vacant and produce no units, potentially for years, until the market conditions are favorable. And speaking of that, the affordable complex, which was a wonderful quality, beautiful housing that people were so happy to live there. It was actually one of the best apartments I've seen in Austin. Once that was shuttered, they said, oh, we need to do this to build more housing. It is still shuttered and vacant to this day and closed down because they didn't get the proper financing they wanted to get the right deal, and the market kind of slowed. So that's the kind of stuff that happens. People get displaced, not even to produce any more housing supply for anyone. And so one of the main takeaways we really want y'all to have is that what you see across all these cases is the profit margin gap. So this gap is when you combine the relatively low property values with a market that caters to the very wealthy people, and that gap, of course, is the profit margin. In short, the potential profit margins are greatest by buying relatively cheap in the Eastern Crescent and selling to the wealthy. By one analysis, at the height of a lot of this speculative market, Austin's housing market was building for households that make over $250,000 a year and can afford $70,500 in housing costs. So that's what happens when you build for a wealthy-driven housing market. Things have changed over the last months in Austin, but maybe we'll talk more later. Next slide. This is a trend we've seen across history. Next slide. Higher the profit margin, the higher the risk of displacement. The more deregulated the land is, so the more that they can build, the higher the profit margin is, the higher the risk of displacement. So that's kind of the overall theoretical understanding we're hoping to impart. And I don't think I have time for this slide, but that's a breakdown. I'll pass